Go.
Welcome to today's community lunch, where we invite everybody from Next Wave Network to come hang out with us, share, and break some bread. And we bring a guest to talk to us. Today's topic is immersive history. And the expert that we have with us is Dr. Warren Hofstra from Shenandoah University, the most senior faculty member at Shenandoah University. So I don't want to hear anything about young. You need young faculty members to innovate. Look at the two of us. We've got white, we're figuring this out. White on our hair, and we're getting old in the tooth, long in the tooth, but we are striving to encourage others to embrace immersive history. So Warren, why don't you give us your off the cuff on the power of immersive history and why other people like us need to be doing it?
Well, I think the power of immersive history is immersion itself. Now, think about the way we experience the world. We can experience directly the natural world. We can experience directly the material world, the structural world, all around us, the social world, but we can't experience the historical world, can we? At least not directly. So how do we know it? How do we learn from it?
Right.
And that's the question of virtual reality and immersive history. Because as a medium of VR and immersive technologies give us a way to experience the past directly.
And we see some of that maybe in some live action history, like Colonial Williamsburg, or even in there's something that interacting with the past or something like that Dr. Hardwick was using at his school. That's a way to the students learn the history characters as their character, and then they have to interact in improvisational moments. But it's hard to maintain a standard of that because from teacher to teacher, it's one experience, to the other. And things like Colonial Williamsburg, when you have live actors role playing for groups of people, it's very expensive, right? But to your point, predominantly outside of the very small places where living history is trying to be reborn, we're dealing with history as an abstraction, right? And for people like me who are visual and kinetic learners, reading or listening about what happened in history can be difficult for me as a learner, right? And you and I have been addressing that directly. Warren, our first initiative together was immersive, but it wasn't technologically enhanced. Not in the way that we think with virtual reality. So would you share a little bit about that first initiative and what its impact was? Because these immersive experiences, they're sticky. They stick to us. They affect us. They make change. They influence change, even personally or socially, because of the massive empathic impact they have on the experiencer. So go ahead, Warren, talk about where we began.
Yeah, let me just comment on what you just said, JJ. A famous historian once said that, well, history is just one damned fact after another, which gets to your point about history. It seems to so many people to be an abstraction. But you're exactly right about sites, places where history happened. Colonial Williamsburg is a preeminent example. But historic sites, the places and the rooms where things happened, exist all over the world, but just limiting our perspective to American history at the moment. There are thousands of them, and they're embodied in national parks and historic sites. But every community has historic societies, history societies that carefully preserve and interpret historic sites. And in some ways, these sites are the closest that we can come in experiencing history and an immersion in history. But going back to how you and I came to understand immersion, we have to look at our first collaboration, which goes back to the time when you were chair of the theater department at Shenandoah University, and you and the students produced To Kill a Mockingbird. And you proposed to me as a historian, could I come up with an installation in the lobby? And I had to think about what an history installation would be. But what I did with students at Shenandoah University and with people throughout the Winchester community, Winchester, Virginia, where Shenandoah University is located, was to reconstruct an episode that took place, a tragic episode that took place in Winchester in 1944. And that was the lynching of a young Black man. Now, I have to qualify that. This is what we often call a legal lynching. In other words, Howard Walker, who was accused of raping a young white woman with whom he was in some way involved, was subjected to the same, well, trajectory of events as Tom Robinson was in To Kill a Mockingbird. So we created a series of interpretive panels that we put up in the theater lobby. And what turned out to be so powerful for many people who came to see the play was to realize that the themes of the play were not an abstraction. They were not just an artistic or aesthetic creation of the novel by Harper Lee, its translation into a play and a drama by J.J. Rusella. It was in many ways a reflection on events that had taken place in the life of our own community. And
They
out of
couldn't
that,
escape,
I
right? They couldn't escape responsibility, right? It wasn't, they couldn't say this was somebody else, right? Because this had happened in our own community with our own great grandparents, and right? And so they were attached to it. What was even profound was that the family involved was the name of the theater right beside the one we produced it in, right in the lobby. So, I mean, there was, and it even started influencing an awareness of Howard Walker from the NAACP or something like that, right?
members of the NAACP were very active in recreating and interpreting the story of Howard Walker, who was accused of a crime, uh, hustled through a
Conviction.
forced confession, and then a kind of trumped up judicial process and executed all within a matter of months. And his fate paralleled the story of Tom Robinson in To Kill a Mockingbird. But interestingly enough, the NAACP is here in Winchester meeting on the campus for their annual meeting and banquet next week, and requested to put up the same exhibit of Howard, telling the story of Howard Walker. And in fact, it had been most recently used in the Juneteenth celebration this past summer. So this story lives, and it is a constant reminder that what happened in the distance of a theater experience is very immediate in the life of our own community, and that's immersion. That's definitely
Yes.
immersion.
Yeah, they walked out into the lobby and were immersed in story at another level. And when they walked into the second half of the play, they had a sense of obligation, right? A sense of responsibility that they were carrying because, wow, this is not them. This is also us. And I love that. And it was very powerful. And there was no virtual reality or augmented reality, right? It was physical. But what we're seeing is the addition of these technologies allow us to scale, right? Instead of just being able to show it to 10,000 people over the run of the show, we could show it to millions of people across the world in their own time, right? One of the
Exactly.
things you brought up, Warren, is that the most accessible thing we have in our country are historical spaces. But unless we can travel to those, we can't get to them. So there's a real simple way of capturing all of those places and make them entirely accessible to the country. And that's through 360 images and 360 video, right? So our first evolution from an immersive theatrical experience into a immersive technological experience was something called Atmosphere of Hate.
Exactly.
And if I remember correctly, what we did was we approached a class of your history students
Hmm.
and we challenged them for extra credit, I believe, to build an immersive experience. And two of them rose to the top, right? I remember there was a woman who designed an experience in a historical classroom, an actual classroom that was active during during the civil rights era, and when desegregation happened in the school system. And what she wanted to show was a classroom with a teacher with a white class, and then what happened the year that desegregation happened, and then what happened progressively over the next 10 years. And what was interesting in that experience is there's a teacher teaching to the white students, and then as the years shift and you can move this little year um, uh, 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 toggle, and it takes you to the next year. And in desegregation, most of the white students are gone, right? When you experience that part of history, the white families just remove their kids and put them into a private school in this region, right? Because the student's history was particular to the region. And what she wanted to show, and this was probably a little of her placing her thoughts, and probably accurately, is the difference between how the teacher teaches the white class to how the teacher teaches the black class to how the teacher teaches an integrated class. Um, but that, go ahead, go
No,
ahead.
I was gonna say, and you recall, you placed the 360-degree camera, in one of the students' desks, so
Right.
that the participant, the user of this experience, was a member of those classes and
That's right.
saw the educational process as it was transformed by integration from the perspective of a student.
Yes.
And what we learned from that, of course, was the power of immersion. That when the participant becomes the protagonist,
Right.
becomes embodied in the story, it becomes a deeply immersive experience.
And personal, right? It becomes a personal experience. You want to talk about removing abstraction. Not only do you get them to see and imagine the foundational place, but they start to care about it. Starts to matter. And then we talk about John Orris, right?
Uh-huh.
Um,
Orem, yes, John Orem.
John Orem.
Orem,
Orem.
yes.
Oh, I so apologize to John. John, my love to you if you watch this. So what I tasked John to do is John comes up with an idea to sit at a lunch counter during a 1960s civil rights era sit-in Greensboro. And I tasked him to write the script out in four directions, north, south, east, and west, so that there are things happening in each one of the quadrants. And we end up producing his piece of work, and it's stunning. It's so transformational. We called it Atmosphere of Hate because you're inside the experience and you can feel the atmosphere. And if you look it up on YouTube, you can find Atmosphere of Hate if you want to see what it is that we're talking about. And we built it at Shenandoah, and there were probably 46 to 50 people that are in an old Bob Evans. And the Bob Evans really establishes the time period beautifully. Um,
It's a lunch counter.
yeah, yeah. And there are so many different perspectives in the room for you to follow. And then what I remember most about it is when we finally showed it off to the students at the end of the semester, um, that the university had already decided that they wanted to feature it in Martin Luther King's 20th anniversary assassination.
Martin Luther King Day, the next January,
Yeah,
his birthday. Yeah.
right. But they were going to feature it in USA Today News, right? They were going to put a large advertisement Shenandoah for it. And I remember that young man tearing up. And what he said was, if you had told me even 3 years ago that anyone would have cared about this West Virginia farmer's thoughts, I would have told you that you were wrong. And so when you get these young people creating these experiences, it also changes how they see themselves, right? And it's really it's powerful, right? So what part of what Warren and I are striving to do is to create opportunities for students to build their ideas. Did you want to talk about atmosphere of hate,
Yeah,
Warren?
yeah, absolutely. And the final point you made, encouraging students to build their ideas into immersive experiences. This serves as really a very powerful model because John came up with the concept of creating an immersive experience out of the lunch counter sit-ins, but not the violence that we're all familiar with. And so many people have seen the videos of even that first lunch counter sit-in in Greensboro, North Carolina, that ended in with a white mob uh, pulling the black students who were occupying the lunch counter off their stools and beating them. And it turned into a mob scene of violence. But what John wanted to do was to create the environment but not the violence itself. Uh, and so the word atmosphere, the atmosphere of hate, is very appropriate because it was the evocation of the feelings
Yeah.
of those students who had the courage to take that heroic action,
Yep.
which we today celebrate as a turning point in one of many, but a turning point in the civil rights movement. And I remember participating as one of the co-producers with you of the experience. But when I first put on a headset and found myself sitting at the counter with the white clientele on either side, but then the movement of African American students into the lunch counter as the white people left and they occupied the stools and sat at the lunch counter with me, that as I looked around and as the tension built and as a mob began gathering behind me, I mean, this is part of the power of immersive experiences. It happens in all directions, as you said, northeast, south, and west. As the mob began to gather and to uh, torment and with catcalls and insults. You could feel the tension, and that's what so many people carried away from that experience is, and that's feeling. They could feel the
Yes.
tension that built, and feel what those students must have felt, and get a sense of the courage it took to take a stand at that moment in history. And you're right, it profoundly affected many people, and it became well known at this university, Shenandoah University. And the president, Tracy Fitzsimmons, asked on that epic Martin Luther King Day, to ask the board, members of the board of directors, to uh, experience the atmosphere of hate. And many of them were just profoundly moved. And I was more than just one person who entered into our, after the discussion, talkback period, really in tears. And it was one of those moments in the life of an institution in which, well, a profound change happened. And one of the changes was the establishment of the Shenandoah Center for Immersive Learning with significant support directed by the eminent J.J. Rusella. So one thing leads to the next in this story of how, well, you and I came to understand the real power of immersive experiences and immersive history
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
way of understanding the past, learning about the past, not as one damned fact after another,
right.
but through the power of empathy, of
Yeah,
being able to put ourselves in the shoes of people of the past and experiencing the past not through the distance, the objectivity of, say, listening to a lecture about it, to reading a book about it, to watching a documentary about it, or even exploring it on a website, but to experience it directly. And that's the real effective power of virtual reality. That's
yeah.
what that's what that's the essence of immersive learning.
It's transformative, and the empathy, and yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about the great experiment, and I'll bring up the.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's next, JJ, in
But
our learning curve here?
yeah, but first, I want to talk about the focus groups that we put people through, because we discovered something very profound from those focus groups, of people of all ages and all backgrounds that got into the headset and experienced the atmosphere of hate. And the
Students,
singular
faculty, staff, and board.
That's right. That's right. And people from outside our community. Um, the most profound discovery that I had was to find out that people, when we asked them if they identified as a Black person or a white person inside the experience, it varied. And there was no direct connection between that person's actual background and the character that they found themselves in the shoes of. Right?
Mhm.
So we found Black people who felt like they were a white patron in the room. We found white people who thought they were a Black student in the room, right? That is a profound discovery because it means that we're able to place somebody inside of somebody else's shoes, to your point, Warren, but they don't have to have any empathic relationship in order for them to get there, right? So that means we can potentially shift people's points of view significantly because of the empathy that's generated inside of these, and that it's not necessarily attached to the person's personal background. Um, so that was a massive discovery for us and how we began to play with it. What we learned was if we ask you a question, we can actually drop you into a perspective, right? So if before you went into the experience, I said, what might it like to be a Black student, at the Civil Rights Era sit-in in Greensboro, all of a sudden you're asking yourself that question, you cast yourself in that role, right? The ability to influence somebody in story that simply is also a powerful discovery. So, but I did want to take us to our next evolution, right? Once we finished that, we thought, what should we do next? And I remember the question in my mind being, what is the single most important moment of history that we could teach, right? If we're going to build something, and I was thinking about this, and let me become a little bit academic, Warren.
Yeah, please do.
It's
These
because
historians wouldn't identify the single most important moment in history because many of them rise to that level of significance. But you're exactly right. That was the question that we asked ourselves.
and so we're wondering, what is that most important moment. What I start thinking about is something that I used to teach as a professor of theater survey. There's something called the Concordia Regularis, and in it, we have to realize that theater becomes excommunicate, right? So the church ends theater in the world, and it's born back inside of theater, inside of the church. The only place it can be born is inside of the church. And so there's a document called the Concordia Regularis that teaches the priests how to put on the show, right? And in it, the show that they're putting on is for the quem quertus, whom seek ye. And for the church at that time, the first show they put on is the most important moment in Christian history. It's the moment when Christ is discovered to be alive again, 3 days later, right, reborn. So any piece of theater after that moment is, at some level, a bastardization, right? It's less than, it's for entertainment purposes.
Heresy in
So,
some degree, yes.
yeah. So what I was asking myself was, what is that quem quertus moment in American history? What is that apex moment? And what we landed on was the constitutional debates, right? The highest law in the land.
The Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, exactly.
Yeah. And then we brought in a group of students to build a game, right? To build the historical experience. First, we wanted to know, what should our topic be, right?
Out
And
of all the constitutional provisions that were debated and decided upon at that convention, what would be the most impactful and accessible?
the two topics they came up were electing an executive officer who's our president. And the second one is the topic that was not allowed to be debated at the convention, which was slavery, yet we see it all throughout the notes, right?
Exactly.
And the group decided that slavery was too sensitive, and decided to tackle the more defined answer by the group, and that was the electoral college and how that whole debate brought about those thought processes. So, do you want to talk about that experience, Warren?
Yeah, exactly. The question about the Electoral College was really one of how to select a chief executive in a republic. And this, unless you go back to perhaps ancient Greece or the Republic period of Rome, was something that no one had any direct experience in, because the political model, of course, throughout the Western world was monarchy, where heredity determined, or civil war determined the ascent of political power from a single central ruler to the next. And in a republic, such a hereditary descent of political power was entirely inappropriate. So, how to build from the popular sovereignty of the people a structure of government in which there was a separation of powers between legislative, executive, and judicial branches? Could that chief executive of the executive branch be selected? So it was a very complex question, and the delegates themselves agreed and said so much that it was the most difficult question that they faced. The outcome, of course, is the Electoral College, which in part, because of the original structure given it in the Constitution, but also the way it developed in American history in the story of political party development and conflict, it's become something that it wasn't originally intended to be. In fact, the delegates themselves recognized that addressing the question of selecting the chief executive was the most difficult tasks that they had before them. They were immensely pleased with the results, being the Electoral College, as it came to be called, not at the time, but later. And in fact, in the ratification debates, there was relatively little question raised about, controversy or conflict raised about the selection as it was devised in Article 2 of the Constitution for the presidency. So we chose to focus on the Electoral College because it is in many ways a very troublesome way of selecting a chief executive. It did not become a model that other uh, governments that were developing Republican forms of government adopted. As far as I know, the United States is really the only country in the world that has such a system for selecting a chief executive, and at times it's profoundly dysfunctional because it enables the selection of a single individual to represent the people on the basis of less than a majority of the people. And there have been 5 times in American history in which the President of the United States received fewer votes, popular votes, than an opponent, but was selected as the president through the dysfunction of the Electoral College. So it's a very problematic institution. And because it is so controversial in life today, and because there's no other element of the Constitution, no other provision of the Constitution that has received more proposals for amendment, for elimination and replacement than the Electoral College. So we selected it because of its significance, because of the controversy surrounding it, and because the debates about it uh, not only persisted throughout the Constitutional Convention, but that they revealed the political attitudes and differences of so many of the delegates. So it was a very, I think, effective decision that we made. But we've always held out the hope that considering the great experiment as an immersive experience in history would be a model that we can further develop or that others can borrow and recreate the really revealing debates over the issue of enslavement and its role in a Republican society. So that may come, and I hope it does come in the future, if the great experiment as a virtual experience is successful in convincing people that the power of immersion in the past is a very effective way of understanding not only the past, but the world today.
Well, and now here we are a few years after that moment, and we actually have a functioning Independence Hall that we captured with the assistance of the National Center for the Constitution and Independence Hall themselves. And that was all captured by students and built by students. So now you can sit in Independence Hall beside Benjamin Franklin, who's your buddy, right? And he will help you watch 25 minutes of the debates in 2 different dates of sessions, right? They broke and they did not agree, and they came back to debate it again. Um, and then you can meet with one of the delegates, right? And hear from them what their perspective is, and learn what their state's agendas and needs were, right? And why they were debating from the points of view that they were debating, what they believed in. And then you're invited to step into that delegate's shoes during the debate and to use their words, right? Those dense, complex words. And then you're invited to come back and re-debate again, right? Except now we're asking you to put it in your own words.
Yes, exactly.
And so this is talk about evolving out of abstraction into understanding, right? we're taking the students through a learning map, a process that starts from understanding, right? And then moves into adoption of those ideas and empathy of those ideas, and then into synthesis. Because once you start putting them into your own words, because at the very end, we then have a free form debate where a new topic is introduced and the students have to debate that topic. And it could be, what would your character's perspectives be today on the electoral college? Because one of the beautiful things about experiencing this is learning why they wanted the electoral college. What was its purpose? What were the things they were trying to fight? What were the challenges they were trying to solve? And then to look at how it functions today and to compare and contrast its use today versus its original purpose. Um,
And to take action regarding those perspectives. Yes, indeed.
right. And to bring our culture, our potentially our own culture, into an understanding of who we are. What's their country? What's the foundation? What do we believe in? Right. So that they can participate more with us. And that's easy to do. Now it's built and it can be experienced by anybody.
Accessible on the project website, which was for anyone listening and curious, www.su.edu/TGE. The TGE stands for the Great Experiment. But JJ, you're exactly right and very adept at describing the way we built this immersive experience out of 5 modules. An opportunity for anyone, from an individual to a group of up to 9, because there are 9 delegates who were very active in the debate, to witness the debate in Module 1, and then to sit down in a one-on-one virtual experience set in Independence Hall with one of the delegates, who informs you about his life experiences and his positions and philosophy, and then experience embodiment in that delegate, active in the debate, reading the script carefully derived from James Madison's extensive notes on the convention. In other words, uh, being immersed in the experience itself, and then borrowing a theater technique that you introduced, in which a team of actors can put the actual script into their own words as a vehicle for better understanding it. That's module 4. And then a final module in which this group of 1, 2, or up to 9 individuals can enter into a debate on an original question, such as eliminating the Electoral College and replacing it with a different system, more suitable to, say, a democracy based on popular sovereignty, or any question that they want to investigate. But there's something very important going on in all of this, because it takes place in a carefully reconstructed um, setting of the assembly room in the Pennsylvania State House, which is now called Independence Hall, that so many Americans have visited. It's one of the most visited historic sites in the history of our country. And our colleague, Mohammed Obeid,
Yeah.
who took when you left to establish Marcella Immersive, he became the director of the Skill Lab and created the virtual twin of the assembly room in Independence Hall in
Yes.
stunning reality. So all of this takes place then in the Great Experiment and virtually in the room uh, that, to borrow a line from the musical Hamilton, was the room where it happened. But what a virtual experience in history does, and this is where it gets right to the core of it, it allows the participants to experience not only the room where it happened, but when it happened. Because we know from the neuroscience of virtual experiences of immersive technology that the experiences that we have in a virtual environment map onto the brain in ways very close parallel to the way we encode and process memories of our experiences in the real world.
Yep.
So that virtual experience replicates what it would have been like in terms of the way our brains respond to the possibility that we were actually at the Constitutional Convention, that we saw it, that we participated in it. And that's a really profound recognition. And it distinguishes immersive media in many ways from all the other media by which we understand the world,
Yep.
the way we study the world, the way we create scholarship
Yep.
about the world. And scholarship is, well, it's the creation and communication of new knowledge. And we use all the basic media by which we, as humans, communicate. And we speak about it. We read, we listen to lectures, we read books, we watch a movie or a documentary. All these are ways in which we experience and learn history, and in many ways they're quite immersive. We can be deeply immersed in listening to a good storyteller or a good lecturer speak about something that happened. We're immersed and often swept away in imagining the plot of a good story or book or good history. We're immersed in a movie, of course. We can also experience the past by visiting a website. So we listen to a lecture, we read a book, we watch a movie, we visit a website, but we experience virtual reality. That's the term we use. We experience it. And that's because, and you could say something more about this because it's such a powerful concept in the field, this phenomenon of presence,
Yep.
where in a virtual experience, imagine yourself having, as a participant in the great experiment, you've watched the debate, you've learned about one of the delegates, you've become embodied in one of the avatars of those delegates in the virtual room where it happened, but also virtually when it happened. And then you participate in the debate. And then you put the debate into your own words. And then you can take agency and change the debate,
Yeah.
to re-debate, to re-engage the past. So that experience of presence, it's when, as you know, the virtual, the recreation of Independence Hall becomes real.
Right.
Because
It's
it's
the
a
moment the
you
brain.
switch, yes, when the mind accepts the
Yeah.
virtual as real.
Right. When it forgets it's inside of a fantasy, when you forget you're inside of a fantasy, magic starts to happen.
Yes.
And here's what I think this entire community lunch is about, Warren, for me. It's to invite other historians to start building immersive history. And if they've got no other way to do it, have them contact us and we'll help them get there. Right? Um, because we've we've captured two, right? We've captured two immersive histories in technology that can be played again and again. But there are every other, right? There's an infinity inside of these boxes. And they're now ready for our historians and our humanities experts to begin deploying them beyond just the computer scientist. So I've got one last question for you, Warren. What's next, brother? What do you see? What are you excited about creating? What do you want to create yourself? What can we do together? Let's give somebody a peek into the next steps of Dr. Hofstra and immersive history as you see it.
Well, one thing is just what you exactly said, JJ, to invite others, the community of historians, and everyone who does history, and we all do history in some way, to explore this technology and to create experiences in history in which we can not only be in the places where it happened, but we can be in those places when it happened.
Right on.
And we can imagine many different key moments, processes in history in which which we could create those experiences. And more specifically, about the great experiment, one of the great challenges that faces us now is to embrace artificial intelligence, AI,
Right.
as a driving vehicle for the experience. To
Yep.
give you an example, you mentioned the second module of the monologues. We call them monologues because they're an experience where the user sits down with one of the delegates for about 15 minutes, during which the delegate simply describes his life experience and position and principles. But we can make that interactive. We can, with artificial intelligence, we can give the participant the opportunity to query the delegate, to
Agency.
ask questions of that delegate. And
Yep.
if that delegate is trained on a curated knowledge base of their own, well, uh, personal papers and public papers, their letters, their journals, their diaries, which in many ways are very copious and have been copiously collected and are available through print versions and various digital versions, and also include in this large language model of sound verified historical information about a delegate, the published scholarship on these individuals. If we can train them on this knowledge base, the responses that they can give are not subject to hallucinations from the internet, but to solid historical scholarship. So, in this way, we can, using AI, insert this interactivity, this engagement, this participation between people of the past, speaking from their own documented record to us today.
Yeah.
So that's one more way in which we can not only be in the room where it happened, but when it happened. So that's one of the objectives, say, for the great experiment, to take those level 2 monologues and make them more interactive so that the participant can raise questions and engage in not a monologue, but a dialogue
Right.
with the delegate. And then to be able to, in many ways, even more effectively participate in the debate. So there are other ways in which we can make the great experiment increasingly interactive. And this magnifies the power of immersion, magnifies the power of empathy
Yep.
in the past. So those
Yeah.
are some of the, I think, the future, the objectives that lie before us. But our hope is that uh, what has happened at the Skill Lab at Shenandoah University and is happening uh, um, at the same time at other universities and similar programs in the corporate sector and in the public sector, ways in which we can build and learn from and come to an understanding of history that's distinct in these immersive environments. So, the possible future of immersive technology as a means of communication is really immense and profound. And I've asked myself this question: is this a Gutenberg moment for immersive technology? Gutenberg and the development of interchangeable type, which made possible the book as a means for distributing knowledge uh, throughout a broad population. I mean, that profoundly changed the way our human species could experience the world and interpret the world. Uh, Text and the book, and in fact, his discipline of history is based on these developments. So are we at a kind of Gutenberg moment for immersive technology? Well, we can only kind of hold on. Hopefully, it's a dynamic ride, a real Nantucket sleigh ride uh, into the future. Maybe we're at this point of inflection, a profound development in human society.
Well, I believe we are at that point of inflection, and I believe what is essential in order for us to cross the technology chasm sooner than later is for um, students and faculty members to start building experiences with these technologies that illuminate their subject matter expertise. There are two last thoughts that I want to end us with. One is that the great experiment is out there now and it's ready to be used in classes. So if somebody wants to start experimenting with it and use it, it's available right now, right? Because
www.su.edu/TGE. And there are two versions that can be downloaded to existing headset technologies and technology that's becoming less and less expensive and more a consumer item. A headset now costs less than half the cost of the telephone you're carrying in your pocket, JJ.
right, that's right. The other thing I wanted to say is I wanted to share with our audience that the great experiment, after a few years of working through with University of Virginia Press, um, it's looking like the great experiment is going to be an academically um, published uh, and validated learning piece, and that's significant, right? For us to move from publishing books to being able to publish experiences and for those to be academically validated. Warren, I would like to congratulate you and the rest of the team on that. You have really been the leader to drive that forward. Dr. Obaid as well. So Dr. Hardwick, congratulations to all of us. But
And you
what
too,
I wanted,
JJ. I mean, the four of us have collaborated as the leadership team on the Great Experiment Project. And we've all uh, combined our efforts to validate the Great Experiment as a work of scholarship.
right,
And to explain, we proposed the idea of publishing the Great Experiment as a virtual reality experience to the University of Virginia Press and met a very receptive audience among the staff there. And the whole project has gone through the proposal stage, peer review, through editorial board review, through board review, and through the development of a contract that in many ways establishes the potential of the future for virtual experiences as scholarship. That and publishing the virtual experience, the Great Experiment, with the University Press, may be the first time this is ever done in human history. So it's a real singular accomplishment of not just of those of us who have guided it through its development, but of the potential of immersive technology itself. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, Warren, I would like to thank you for joining us today and talking about immersive history. I know that we're going to be coming back and talking more. I want to build things together. I want to show our community how to build the way we build. Um, uh, Aaron Collegeman and I are going through a project right now and watching everybody as it allowing people to watch as it builds and develops um, and to see, hopefully an easy way for other people to jump in with 2 feet and just start, building sandcastles in the sand.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a
so
great
um,
sandbox, isn't it?
it is. It is. Thank you, brother, for being such a respected and tremendous colleague. I just want to ask if everybody will just hold on after at the end of this, because I just wanted to speak to the group that's here for a second. Thank you. We'll stop recording and thanks again.